1983, after going to the Roxy one evening and see all these kids break dance and doing graffiti, whatever, I had an idea and I wanted to organize the first hip-hop concert kind of all over Manhattan. I went to WBLS and BLS recommended me to a couple of sponsors, and I took Coca-Cola into funding us to the tune of $300,000 in 1983, and we had a 3 months, every borough, every Saturday afternoon with the BLS van and Kids Would Dance, whatever. The winners were going to go to, back then Coca-Cola said, where do you want to have the finale? I said, Studio 54. They said nothing less than Radio City Music Hall. I'm going, hey, Radio City Music Hall, that was one of my dreams. When I came here from Europe, I walked through there going, someday I'd like to do something here. What we did not know is 5 days before the event went down, May 23rd, 1983, we were called in, and the local music union guys, 3 white guys, actually said to us on a table, we don't want any at the Radio City Music Hall. And I grew up in Europe, and I had heard that word once or twice, but we grew up on Otis Redding, Sam Dave, Booker T, Wilson Pickett. We didn't really know the whole race thing was this bad, especially me, since I just arrived here. All I can tell you is that I threatened to hold a press conference where I would repeat exactly that what was being said. And 4 days later, Radio City Music Hall opened up with no employees from Radio City Music Hall, and it was the first time 5,655 inner city kids, poor Latinos, poor black, poor white, got an opportunity to go to Radio City Music Hall. Magic, Mr. Magic, who used to host a very famous show, Rap Attack on BLS, was the host of the event. I have a letter in my office stating that we were actually the first black event at the Radio City Music Hall, which I had a hard time believing. I mean, I couldn't believe that there were no concerts in there. So I did that, and that was then followed by Russell Simmons storming into my office and saying, here's another white guy stealing our heritage. And I go, dude, I am nothing but love. I'm not stealing anything. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take Run DMC, which nobody had ever heard of, LL Cool J, nobody ever heard of, Grandmaster Flash and Houdini, and a bunch of breakdancers. I'm going to take them on a tour, and we call it the Fresh Fest. And since you raised $300,000 from Coca-Cola, could you do that again? And I said, well, I can't go back to Coke, but I'll see what I can do. And I called my only Swiss friend, and I said, is there anything that the Swiss are trying to sell? And he said, well, there's a guy named Max Imgrut, who's now my neighbor, who's selling something called Swatch watches out of the back of his pickup truck. So I flew Max to the Roxy on a Friday night, and he watched the whole thing, and he didn't get it. And I said, if you give me your whole marketing budget, which was $360,000, we rename it the Swatch Watch Fresh Festival Tour, and I throw out Swatch watches every night, and I'll make sure that the Fat Boys wear about 20 of them on each arm, and LL and what have you. And he left that night, and he says, I'm going to do it with you, but if it's not working, I will kill you. And I said, okay, I'll take those odds. And we went on tour, and of course, Russell didn't want to put the Fat Boys on because nobody had heard of them at that point. And if you want to talk about branding, by then they were called the Disco 3. So I says, fuck you, Russell. So I went down to the old Tower Record store on Broadway, and I handed out 5,000 flyers by myself. Guess the weight of the Fat Boys, which nobody ever heard of. The person who wins the total gets 800 cans of Diet Pepsi and $1. All right? So thousands of kids lined up at Tower Records. I put a scale. Al Sharpton wouldn't approve of that today. I put a scale in the window, all right? And I had Curtis Blow on the left and my 3 guys standing on the scale. And this kid won. He lived up in Harlem. He won 868 pounds. Vic Miles from Channel 2 News filmed the whole thing. Twice, when the Pepsi Cola was delivered up in Harlem, his mama looked out the window and says, you ain't bring this shit up, so they sold it right in the street. So we got it twice. I called Russell up and said, will that do it as the opening act? He said, yo, man, that's just local. I go, son of a... Next day I walked down the street and I read the newspapers, and it was October 1984, and it says, the Jackson 5 are reuniting. So I called my wife, my partner, and said, can you write a press release that the Jackson 5 have picked an unknown group, the Fat Boys, as their opening act? And she said, they did? I said, no, can you just write me a press release? And I distributed that press release by myself across the city, and I got on Good Morning America the next morning. And it's one of the most famous tapes, because when the host turns around to the Fat Boys, and I told them, when you don't know what to say, just go, brr, stick 'em, ha ha, stick 'em, which was a big song they had. So he's going around, this must be absolutely awesome that you are going to be on the Jackson 5 tour. The guys never even been out of Brooklyn. It was the first time they were in Manhattan. And they started stick. And by the time I got back to my record company, Walter Yetnikoff, who was the president of CBS, was yelling at Maurice Levy. He said, I don't give a who this guy. Who's this guy telling everybody you're the opening act? I called Russell. He goes, good, you're the opening act. That's how Fat Boys launched. By the time we came out, they went gold in 2 days. Yes. That's how we did back then.